Turned out OG voice Sama convinced them to let me keep my job. Welcome, otakus. The story opens with a commoner crying while a group of nobility laugh at him. One noble promises him a chance before he dies and asks for a magic spell strike. Despite trying, the man's magic only produces a weak flame. The noble mocks him, claiming this is the best a commoner can do, citing lineage, talent, and hard work as essential for magic, as taught by William Bordeaux. The noble then uses powerful fire magic, burning the man, who admires the flames despite the pain, wishing he had learned more magic. He wakes up to find himself surrounded by large maids, mistakenly perceiving them as giants. When he tries to defend himself with magic, he realizes his hands are small like a baby, accidentally blasting a hole in the castle wall. In public, the news spreads about the birth of the 7th prince of the Saloum Kingdom, Prince Lloyd, bringing joy to the kingdom. Meanwhile, the huge maids are surprised by the prince's magical abilities. 10 years later, the maids search for Prince Lloyd, who tries to sneak away in hopes to get some reading time, but encounters court officials instead. He asks the officials to keep his presence a secret from the maids, and one of them suggests going on a hunt as a condition to cover for him. However, the prince slips away instead. Another official reminds him that as the 7th prince, he's unlikely to inherit the throne, so they shouldn't waste time flattering him. However, he argues that this isn't entirely true, pointing out that Lloyd displayed remarkable abilities as a baby, like speaking shortly after birth and preferring spell books over picture books. He even refused breast milk, which led the official to believe Lloyd might be the reincarnation of William Bordeaux. The other official finds this idea absurd, but Lloyd admits he's someone who has been reincarnated, previously just a commoner with intact memories for reasons unknown to him. Yet, he's uninterested in status or glory, preferring to follow his past life's philosophy. He heads to the library, eager to uncover the impressive magic it holds, considering it superior to the Saloum Magic Academy's collection. Trying to read, he's interrupted by a maid named Silpha, who engages him in sword training. Lloyd questions the necessity of sword training for a 7th prince unlikely to ascend the throne, but Silpha insists it's crucial for a royal family member to be skilled with a sword. She reveals she's been tasked with Lloyd's education for 3 years, considering it her life's purpose. Lloyd realizes she'll continue training him until he shows improvement and engages her seriously in combat. They engage in a sword fight, with Lloyd noticing Silpha's tendency to hold back. He admits to using control-type magic to track her movements, considering it cheating, but he's eager to return to reading books. Despite his efforts, Lloyd acknowledges he's still no match for her due to differences in arm strength, stamina, and height. Even when copying her techniques, these factors disadvantage him, leading to his defeat. Determined to compensate, he cheats by using magic to lengthen his sword, enhance his physical abilities, and levitate. Now evenly matched, Lloyd impressively fights Silpha, attempting a finishing blow. However, she blocks it and suspects him of cheating, realizing he's using levitation and extending his sword's reach. Despite this, she admires his talent, especially his ability to use 2 spells simultaneously, a feat even court magicians struggle with. Lloyd is relieved she hasn't discovered that he was using 4 instead of 2 spells at the same time. Later, in the bath with other huge maids, Lloyd asserts he can bathe alone now, but Silpha knows he'll bury himself in books if left alone. Lloyd wonders why this is happening to him, prompting the maids to warn him of the forbidden library demon, claiming it will consume him if he doesn't behave. Confused, Lloyd learns the demon, named Grimoire, was sealed in a book after nearly destroying Saloum, supposedly housed in the castle's forbidden library. Silpha dismisses it as a fairy tale, insisting a sealed demon poses no threat, but Lloyd's trembling betrays his fear, earning him the maid's amusement. One of the maids offers Lloyd to sleep with her if he's afraid, sparking a fight among them for his attention. However, Lloyd slips away, quivering with excitement rather than fear. At night, he stealthily leaves his room and conceals himself with magic as he makes his way to the forbidden library. A guard, one yawning and the other alert, discusses the library's dangers, a powerful demon and magic capable of shaking the kingdom. Lloyd enters unnoticed. The guard mentions the library's impenetrability due to sealing spells cast by the 10 most powerful mages. Despite this, Lloyd effortlessly breaks the seal and marvels at the vast book collection, unaware such a place existed in the palace. Eagerly reading, he plans to replace the barrier once he finishes exploring. Suddenly, a demon emerges from one of the books, impressed by Lloyd's entry. Lloyd, curious, introduces himself, and the demon, Grimoire, requests to be unsealed, offering gold in return. However, Lloyd discovers the gold is merely dust transformed by creation magic, which Grimoire admits is not his specialty. Lloyd promises to replace his seal, explaining his allegiance to the kingdom and his dedication to protecting it from demonic threats. Therefore, he cannot let him escape. Grimoire assures Lloyd that he holds no grudge against present-day humans, as the mage who sealed him lived long ago. Despite this, Lloyd remains skeptical. Grimoire proposes to teach Lloyd ancient magic if he releases him, intriguing Lloyd. Doubting Grimoire's sincerity, Lloyd questions whether he'll truly teach him. Grimoire affirms his intention, sensing Lloyd's abundant magical talent. Lloyd agrees to unseal Grimoire, asking for instruction in ancient magic. As he gets free, Grimoire launches an attack with an ancient spell, Arcus Obscura, expecting it to be lethal against Lloyd. Surprisingly, Lloyd erects a barrier, emerging unharmed. Impressed, Lloyd requests to see more of the spell. Grimoire repeatedly attacks with the same spell, but Lloyd's barrier remains impenetrable. Lloyd calmly analyzes the spell, finding it fascinating and desiring to experience its effects firsthand. He extends his finger beyond the barrier, allowing the spell to injure him. Despite the pain, Lloyd finds the experience both painful and beautiful, licking his blood and asking Grimoire to demonstrate more spells. Grimoire grows another mouth, enabling him to cast 2 spells simultaneously. He merges the spells into a more potent Arcus Obscura, yet Lloyd's barrier remains resilient. Lloyd finds the ability to cast 2 spells at once fascinating, but realizes it's a skill only a demon with 2 mouths can achieve. Even this enhanced spell fails to breach Lloyd's barrier, surprising Grimoire. Lloyd remarks on the enjoyment he must have had learning such a spell. Attempting to escape, Grimoire encounters another barrier, prompting him to question how many barriers Lloyd has created. Lloyd explains the need to prevent mishaps like before, with the castle above them. Grimoire tries to attack Lloyd again, but Lloyd expresses interest in seeing defensive magic instead. He retaliates with a powerful fire spell, severely injuring Grimoire, who fails to defend himself, leaving Lloyd puzzled. After fixing the room, Grimoire praises Lloyd's skill, hailing him as his master. However, Lloyd credits Grimoire, noting Demon's resilience against magic. Grimoire acknowledges that magic can still harm him, sparking Lloyd's curiosity about his endurance. Fearing Lloyd's interest in testing his limits, Grimoire offers to serve as Lloyd's familiar. Lloyd accepts, but worries about Grimoire drawing attention in his current form. Grimoire transforms into a smaller, cuter form, planning to use his charm to his advantage. Lloyd invites him to hop into his pocket, prompting Grimoire to gain control over Lloyd's mind from up close. However, upon nearing Lloyd, Grimoire realizes Lloyd's formidable mana density, rendering him powerless against him. Terrified, Grimoire suggests being called Grim from then on, opting for obedience. The scene shifts to Prince Albert visiting Lloyd in the library, with Grim hiding from Albert's sight. Later, Albert and Lloyd head to the shooting range, where Albert showcases his magic by hitting bullseyes, earning praise from the accompanying minister. Grim observes Albert's talent, while Lloyd acknowledges his brother's intelligence and physical prowess, considering him a potential future king with access to various castle facilities. Occasionally, Albert invites Lloyd to join him, providing rare opportunities for Lloyd to use magic within the castle. It's now Lloyd's turn to shoot targets. Lloyd, uninterested in the throne, aims to avoid drawing attention to himself, preferring to focus on studying magic without distractions. He decides to make his fireballs curve to graze the targets, a challenging feat. With Grim's skepticism, Lloyd employs his magic, successfully grazing all targets uniformly. Though ministers praise Lloyd's skill, they compare him unfavorably to Albert, who hits targets directly. Grim, however, marvels at Lloyd's precise control, unnoticed by others. Lloyd explains the benefits of adding rotation to fireballs, stabilizing their trajectory. Impressed, Grim realizes Lloyd's passion for magic. Albert then suggests Lloyd play around while he takes a break. Prince Albert leaves, leaving Lloyd alone in the shooting gallery, which delights Lloyd as he plans to experiment with magic. Eager to try Grim's double incantation trick, Grim explains it's a skill exclusive to demons due to their multiple mouths. Lloyd absorbs Grim, manifesting Grim's mouth in his hand, an unconventional approach to double casting. Curious, Lloyd asks Grim if he can cast advanced magic spells. Grim, confident in his abilities, agrees to try casting together. Mid-cast, Grim panics, surprising Lloyd. Grim questions Lloyd's intentions, shocked by his attempt to stack spells. Lloyd explains spell stacking as a method to combine incantations from multiple spells, abbreviating casting time. Lloyd reveals he attempted 100 incantations simultaneously, alarming Grim, who clarifies that a typical stack involves only 2 to 3 spells. Undeterred, Lloyd discovers he can speak through Grim's mouth, realizing he can use both mouths simultaneously. Excited, he attempts to recite 2 advanced incantations at once, merging fire and water-type spells. Grim, astounded by Lloyd's audacity in merging different spell types, worries about the safety of casting a double incantation. Lloyd fires the merged spell into the sky, and the scene shifts to Prince Albert conversing with ministers while enjoying tea. The ministers question Albert's favoritism toward the 7th prince, dismissing Lloyd as merely a talented child in magic. Albert defends Lloyd, arguing that they underestimate his potential. He highlights Lloyd's precision in grazing all targets equally, suggesting it might not have been accidental. Albert believes Lloyd could become a grand sage one day, foreseeing him as a valuable asset. The ministers acknowledge the logic in Albert's desire to secure the services of a grand sage, but Albert insists he simply wants to bond with his younger brother. As they discuss, they realize it's nighttime, indicating Lloyd may have already completed his shooting practice. Instead of hitting the targets, Lloyd's magic inadvertently destroys the shooting range, creating a hole through the sky with the night shining through. Panicked, Lloyd frets over fixing the situation quickly, but the hole miraculously closes on its own after some time. The following day, Grimm notices that news of Lloyd's mishap has made headlines, prompting Lloyd to read about an adventuring party's successful dungeon expedition. Intrigued by the idea, Lloyd decides they should explore a dungeon too. However, Grimm halts him, fearing the outcome of his disappearance. Lloyd reassures Grimm, creating a plant-based double of himself using an acorn. Explaining the double's construction, Lloyd demonstrates its ability to perform basic actions. However, he acknowledges it won't fool Silpha, who has a keen eye for detail. Undeterred, Lloyd sets off from the castle, communicating with Grimm through his hand to ensure all is well on his end. Lloyd reveals that he has transferred Grimm's consciousness into the puppet while absorbing Grimm's body into himself, enabling Grimm to control Lloyd's body. Lloyd instructs Grimm to continue impersonating him while he's away, and Grimm marvels at the puppet's capabilities, relishing the freedom it grants him. Expressing gratitude for having Grimm as a familiar, Lloyd touches his heart, prompting Grimm to urge Lloyd to return soon. Meanwhile, Lloyd contemplates where to find a dungeon and notices a girl fleeing from somewhere. She single-handedly defeats a group of orcs, impressing Lloyd with her martial arts skills. He admires her use of a breathing technique called Qi, commonly practiced in foreign countries, which enhances physical abilities by channeling energy through the body. The girl notices Lloyd observing her and calls him out, but Grimm warns Lloyd against revealing his identity as the Seventh Prince. Lloyd agrees, and the girl, assuming Lloyd is an enemy, charges toward him. Lloyd quickly alters his appearance using an illusion spell and introduces himself as Robert, a novice adventurer. Lloyd's new appearance is a blend of his and his brother's, created through the illusion spell. The girl Tao finds Robert attractive and explains she has spent years training in martial arts. Disappointed by her past encounters with men who chased after delicate priestess-like girls, Tao resolves to make Robert her boyfriend. Robert proposes they tackle a dungeon together, to which Tao eagerly agrees. In the dungeon, Tao showcases her combat prowess, asking Robert if he's impressed by her strength. However, she discovers Robert is more focused on collecting glowing stones than admiring her. Despite this, they press forward, with Tao revealing she hasn't found trustworthy companions for adventuring. The two take a break from their exploration. Robert inquires if Tao used Qi during her battles, surprising her with his knowledge. He compares Qi to mana and emphasizes the importance of breathing while utilizing it. Impressed by Robert's observation, Tao explains that controlled breathing enables them to harness explosive power beyond normal limits, but mastering Qi requires extensive practice. She notices Robert attempting Qi breathing, causing discomfort in his lungs. Concerned for Robert's well-being, Tao advises him to refrain from pushing himself, as inexperienced Qi breathing can cause intense pain. However, Robert persists, intrigued by the newfound energy within him, believing it could enhance his magic. Tao offers to teach him more about Qi, and Robert gratefully accepts, committing to continue his Qi breathing until they exit the dungeon. Meanwhile, Grimm, in the castle, ponders Lloyd's unconventional nature, considering the comfortable life he leads, yet remaining indifferent to it. Grimm is startled by Silpha's unexpected presence. The scene shifts to Tao defeating the dungeon boss with a Qi blast, allowing them to access the treasure chest. Tao remarks on the modest treasures due to the dungeon's undeveloped state, while Robert admires the chest's mechanism, which only opens after the boss is defeated. Tao notices Robert has adapted to Qi breathing and considers him a potential partner, even envisioning her strict grandfather approving of him as a fiancé. Despite this, Robert suggests they open the treasure chest. Upon Tao's attempt to do so, an ambush ensues, but Robert intervenes, saving her. A lich emerges from the chest, prompting Robert to question its nature. Tao reassures him, advising him to leave the dungeon. Despite Tao's warning, Robert insists on staying to witness the confrontation. However, Tao, fearing for his safety, employs a Qi technique to propel him away. Though she expects it may cause some injury, she believes it's preferable to risking his life against the lich. Our useless seventh prince was sent flying by Tao's strike, away from Leech's showdown with Tao. Tao, determined to stall the lich, faces the formidable foe, bewildered by its presence in such a low-level dungeon. Aware that even A-ranked adventurers struggle against it, she resolves to buy time for Robert's escape. Meanwhile, Robert, airborne from Tao's strike, contemplates his lack of knowledge about Qi and dungeons. He erects a protective barrier and halts his flight, deliberating whether to re-enter the fray. Seeking Grimm's advice, Robert notices Grimm's distressed demeanor and hears Grimm's feeble plea to return to the castle immediately, promising to save Tao afterward. In the midst of battle, Tao fears for her life but hopes Robert has escaped. She attempts to slip away unnoticed, but the Lich recognizes her use of chi techniques. It reveals its routine for consuming souls and absorbing the abilities of adventurers who venture into the dungeon. Dismissing Tao as unworthy prey, it acknowledges Robert's evasion of its attack, implying his greater capability compared to Tao's. Tao asserts that while both the Lich and Robert seek knowledge, they differ greatly. Robert finds fascination in even the most mundane things, a trait Tao admires. Despite Tao's sentiments, the Lich remains indifferent, prompting Tao to launch an attack. However, the Lich shields himself with a barrier. Undeterred, Tao continues her assault, drawing on years of chi practice. Despite her persistence, her attacks only manage to pierce the Lich's barrier momentarily before he evades. Exhausted, Tao realizes she's immobilized, and the Lich belittles the power of her chi arts compared to his magic. Just as the Lich prepares a decisive blow, Robert intervenes, shielding Tao with his barrier. He reassures Tao that he'll take over the fight, but stresses the need for haste due to his urgency. Initiating a magical exchange, Robert swiftly maneuvers behind the Lich, using a spell called Full Sprint, astonishing the Lich with its incantation-free execution. Observing Robert's utilization of chi breathing, Tao witnesses the Lich's relentless assault, prompting Robert to contemplate the fusion of chi and mana in his strategy. Meanwhile, the Lich is puzzled by the strength of his barrier, while Robert has a realization. He breathes deeply, hastening his full sprint spell, and continues honing his chi technique amidst the Lich's onslaught. Sensing the barrier hindering his airflow, Robert dispels it. The Lich believes his attacks have shattered the barrier, but Robert deftly evades while utilizing his chi breathing. Experimenting further, Robert blends mana and chi, countering the Lich's assaults with a newly devised technique. Recognizing its initial weakness, he strives to refine it in the heat of battle. Employing discs of mana and chi, Robert relentlessly attacks, gradually enhancing his technique with each iteration. Perplexed, the Lich observes Robert's magic without incantations, surmising it to be chi-based. Despite his doubts, the Lich finds himself matched by Robert's newfound proficiency. Eventually, Robert perfects his technique, splitting both the Lich and the dungeon itself. Upon inspecting the treasure chest, they discover only an old, enchanted knife. While Tao considers it a fruitless endeavor, Robert decides to claim the knife. As the dungeon's treasure chest begins to submerge, Robert questions what's happening. Tao elucidates that dungeons collapse once their treasures are claimed, prompting Robert to speculate that the treasure chest acts as the dungeon's core. He surmises that the core lies dormant underground until a magical item is deposited, triggering its absorption and the subsequent growth of the dungeon. Additionally, failed adventurer's gear contributes to its expansion. As the dungeon nears clearance, it presents one of its assimilated treasures as a reward. While Robert retrieves the chest, Tao urges a swift departure. Robert explains his strategy of utilizing chi techniques against the Lich, citing amusement rather than any perceived slight towards Tao. In flight, Tao identifies the final technique as a chi blade, acknowledging her own inability to wield it. Determined to enhance her skills, she resolves to become more captivating to Robert, who departs for the castle. Tao ponders her future encounters with him, eager to leave an impression. The focus shifts to Lloyd's return home, where he notices Grimm's battered state. Grimm recounts a rigorous training session with Silpha, who mistakenly believed Lloyd had grown weaker. Lloyd consoles Grimm, revealing the underwhelming reward of a mundane knife. Despite the disappointment, Lloyd recognizes the knife's potential value, discovering its treatment with mana essence, a catalyst for enchantment magic, upon examination. Grimm raises the possibility of Lloyd delving into enchantments with the mana essence, but Lloyd clarifies that it's a more intricate process. He combines all the mana essence into a liquid, purifying it with a spell. Lloyd explains the composition of mana essence, consisting of oil, hematite, and silver, noting that hematite is derived from powdered monster cores. Grimm suggests utilizing the dungeon core, realizing they only lack oil and silver. Subsequently, Lloyd seeks silver coins from his father, who obliges, impressed by Lloyd's modest request of silver and not gold. The king wonders about Lloyd's intentions for the silver. After melting the coins, Lloyd sparred with Silpha, utilizing his full sprint spell to outmaneuver her and employing an earth spell to disrupt her balance. Despite his efforts, Silpha prevails. She then offers Lloyd oil, fulfilling their agreement despite his failure to land a hit. Silpha admits her previous concern over Lloyd's performance, but expresses confidence in his potential, envisioning him as a knight commander or even a sword master, given his prowess in both magic and swordsmanship at just 10 years old. After gathering the ingredients, Lloyd combines them and approaches Albert for a supply of weapons to test enchantment magic on. Albert, taken aback by Lloyd's request, consults his knights, who reluctantly relinquish their swords despite their skepticism about a 10-year-old's ability to enchant them. Undeterred by the knights' doubts, Grimm resolves to prove them wrong. Lloyd's initial attempts yield little success, with some swords breaking under the strain of multiple enchantments. By the next morning, Lloyd manages to enchant 50 out of the 120 weapons, apologizing to Albert for the loss of the others, though he secretly enchanted 80 before they broke. Examining the enchanted weapons, Albert recognizes Lloyd's talent, realizing that even seasoned enchanters typically achieve only a 10% success rate. Meanwhile, the knights remain skeptical about the enchantments, suspecting Lloyd of returning the weapons after failed attempts. Among the enchanted weapons, Albert discovers one particularly potent sword, prompting Lloyd to express his desire to see his creations used in battle. Albert informs Lloyd of their father's assignment of a monster hunt and invites him to join. Lloyd eagerly accepts the invitation. As they venture deeper into the forest, Lloyd observes their surroundings and wonders if the monster lurks within. Silpha clarifies that it's not in the woods, but rather by the lake further ahead. Lloyd admits his anticipation for the excursion, as opportunities to leave the castle are rare for him. He's also eager to test the efficacy of his enchanted weapons in combat. Albert remarks on Silpha's constant presence by Lloyd's side, to which he expresses gratitude for the chance to accompany him. Albert explains his decision, citing Silpha's roles as Lloyd's teacher and bodyguard, and assumes she'd miss him if not included. Silpha asserts her position as his teacher, implying the obviousness of her involvement. Albert subtly probes for any deeper sentiments Silpha may harbor for Lloyd, prompting her to draw her sword as a warning. Their conversation is interrupted by the presence of monsters in the vicinity. Suddenly, they're attacked by kobolds, and Lloyd feigns fear. Grimm sees through his act, acknowledging Lloyd's ability to anticipate danger. Lloyd reveals that one of Silpha's basic teachings, spectral detection, allows him to sense his surroundings using chi breathing. Grimm reflects on Lloyd's increasing prowess, noting his constant readiness with spectral detection and defensive barriers. The knights engage the kobolds in combat, effortlessly dispatching them with Lloyd's enchanted weapons. Lloyd observes the effectiveness of the enchantments, noting the sharpness of the weapons instills fear even in their wielders, giving them the sensation of holding a sword for the first time. Albert acknowledges Lloyd's contribution and praises him for his success in battle. Silpha also commends Lloyd's performance, displaying her prowess by dispatching several kobolds. Lloyd realizes he hadn't enchanted her weapon. As a kobold attempts to attack Lloyd, Tao intervenes, revealing her ability to sense creatures nearby. Lloyd is surprised by Tao's presence and her recognition of his use of chi breathing. Tao senses a familiarity in Lloyd's appearance, reminiscent of someone named Robert. After Silpha saves Tao from a kobold, she cautions Tao against being overly familiar with Lloyd. Tao asserts she didn't need assistance and could sense the danger herself, leading to tension between them. Albert diffuses the situation and invites Tao to join them at the lake. Later, as they camp by the lake, Albert thanks Tao and reveals his identity as the second prince of Saloon Kingdom. Tao, surprised, apologizes for her earlier behavior. She notices Albert's resemblance to Robert, but finds him lacking the hot guy vibe she sensed earlier. Albert questions her about someone familiar, prompting Tao to mention Lloyd's resemblance to someone she knows. Meanwhile, Lloyd, hidden in his tent, regrets using spectral detection as Tao's sensitivity to it surprises him. Grimm warns him that stopping now would seem suspicious. Lloyd decides to stay in his tent until the monster arrives, but is taken aback when Silpha enters to change, explaining she'll be sleeping there. She restrains Lloyd when he tries to leave, and Tao walks in, misinterpreting the situation and initiating a confrontation with Silpha. As the argument escalates, Lloyd slips away, realizing that the situation is becoming as suffocating as the castle. Albert teases Lloyd about being a lady killer, but Lloyd denies it. Albert remarks on Silpha's transformation since she began caring for Lloyd, noting her apparent affection for him. He cautions Lloyd about the complexities of relationships with women, citing their potential to be daunting. As they argue, Silpha notices the soldiers ogling her and swiftly deals with them, prompting Lloyd to agree with Albert's warning. Tao reveals her original purpose for being there, to restore an old shrine atop the hill. Silpha suggests Tao leave promptly, but Albert insists she stay for safety, acknowledging her invaluable ability to sense threats. He asks her to remain with the group until morning, when the monster they seek appears. During the ensuing battle with the bear wolf, Silpha guards Lloyd while the knights engage the creature. Grimm recalls the familiarity of the shrine, while Tao assists the knights, noting the toughness of the fight. Albert joins in, utilizing his spellbound sword to enhance his spellcasting and ultimately defeats the monster with a powerful fire spell. Impressed, the knights praise Albert, who credits Lloyd's enchantment for his enhanced abilities. However, Grimm interrupts their celebration, revealing the presence of a demon sealed within the shrine. As the defeated beowulf rises again, accompanied by more monsters, a demon named Pazuzu emerges, seeking vengeance for his injured minion. The group finds themselves overwhelmed by the monsters, which Tao realizes are being controlled by Pazuzu's manipulation of mana. Lloyd, determined to help, asks Grimm to teach him transmutation, but Grimm hesitates due to the urgency of the situation. However, Lloyd persists, prompting Pazuzu to taunt the group, provoking Silpha's anger with his insults. Silpha asks Lloyd for permission to leave, and Lloyd grants her freedom. Pazuzu then attempts to sway Silpha to abandon Lloyd and join him, but she rebuffs his advances, criticizing his foul odor and polluted breath. Undeterred, she vows to kill him for his insults. Pazuzu taunts Silpha, boasting about his ability to continuously heal the monsters under his control with his mana. Meanwhile, Albert and the others notice the slowing regeneration of the other bear wolves, realizing that Pazuzu is concentrating his power on healing his own minion. They recognize an opportunity for victory when the wounded bear wolf weakens. Grimm continues teaching Lloyd the intricacies of transmuting mana, impressed by Lloyd's rapid understanding and mastery of the technique. As Silpha confronts Pazuzu, she effortlessly overwhelms him, borrowing an enchanted sword from one of the knights. Despite Pazuzu's attempts to undermine her confidence by disparaging Lloyd, Silpha remains steadfast, utilizing her dual blade arts to sever the connection between Pazuzu and the bear wolf. Witnessing Silpha's true power, everyone is astonished. Determined to protect Lloyd, Silpha corners Pazuzu, warning him to prepare for his demise. Previously, our 7th prince was caught in a massive fight between Pazuzu the demon and Silpha. Pazuzu is barely managing in front of Silpha and is backed into a corner. Meanwhile, Tao and Albert manage to defeat the last of the bear wolves. Albert says they still need to beat the demon, but then Pazuzu releases a poisonous miasma that weakens Albert, his soldiers, and even Silpha. Pazuzu complains about how long it took him to raise his minions and how easily they were defeated. He attacks Silpha, and when Albert tries to help, he collapses, unable to gather his strength. Pazuzu explains that his miasma makes anyone who breathes it fall under his control. Silpha struggles to stay conscious and insults Pazuzu's bad smell. Just as Pazuzu attacks her, Tao saves her, seemingly unaffected by the miasma. Silpha tells Tao to leave her alone and run, but Tao insists she stop lying and escape if she can. Then Silpha collapses. Pazuzu is surprised that Silpha could stand for so long after inhaling his miasma. He wonders why it doesn't affect Tao, who then tries to attack him but gets captured. He notices her strange breathing technique must be helping her resist the miasma, but capturing her disrupts her breathing. Pazuzu suggests she didn't run away because she wants to be his minion, which angers Tao. She hits Pazuzu with a thunderquake pulse and tells him she can't abandon someone in need. As she tries to steady her breathing, a bear wolf attacks her from behind. Tao barely hangs on, and Pazuzu mocks her, saying he only sees trash on the ground and praising his minions for rising again and again. He releases more miasma and tells Tao she should serve him. Tao says she feels someone's presence giving her courage. Pazuzu is confused, but Tao says the hottest guy of all is coming to kick his ass. Then the bear wolf eats her. Pazuzu thinks it's sad that humans can't understand his charm and decides that Silpha will pay for her actions. He plans to make her his minion, saying her strength justifies the effort and that she will serve him until she dies. Lloyd then realizes that Pazuzu must have used his miasma to control the bear wolves. Pazuzu confirms this, explaining that he killed their parents and used his miasma to make the pups see him as their new parent. Even though he was the one who killed their parents, they started obeying him. Lloyd tells Pazuzu that he's truly awful. Pazuzu is surprised to see Lloyd moving easily in the miasma and wonders how he can do it. Lloyd admits he doesn't know. Pazuzu remarks that no one should be able to move around his miasma like it's nothing. He then notices that Lloyd has a demon with him and asks Grimm why he is protecting a human. Pazuzu says he has never heard of a demon serving a human and wonders why Grimm looks so different. He calls Grimm a disgrace to their kind. Grimm responds that he was going to give Pazuzu some helpful advice as a fellow demon, but after seeing Pazuzu's attitude, he changed his mind. Now, he just wants to see Pazuzu fall. Pazuzu then commands his minions to attack. Lloyd sees this as a chance to test his mana transmutation. He realizes he needs to use a lot of mana and hopes he can control it properly. He creates a field of flowers with his mana transmutation, making the bear wolves feel motherly love. They all surrender to Lloyd. Grimm tells him they are now completely devoted to him because of his mana. Lloyd then orders the bear wolf that swallowed Silpha to let her out. The bear wolf obeys, and Lloyd covers her body to protect her. Pazuzu is shocked that Lloyd could transform so much mana into a flower field instantly and realizes Lloyd must be an incredible sorcerer. Pazuzu tries to use his miasma to regain control of the bear wolves, but Grimm tells him it won't work because they remember he killed their parents. The bear wolves then attack Pazuzu, forcing him to drop Silpha. Pazuzu manages to fend off their attack and take them down. He reminds them that he raised them after killing their parents and viciously strikes them. He then stops supplying the bear wolves with mana and reveals his full mana capacity to Lloyd, warning him to prepare for what comes next. Pazuzu claims that no matter what spell Lloyd uses, it won't work on him. Lloyd remembers Grimm telling him that demons can't be killed by magic, and Grimm adds that it's never been done before. Lloyd wonders why they don't die and starts to release his mana, considering how much magic it might take to kill a demon. Seeing Lloyd's immense mana, Pazuzu is speechless, and Grimm thinks Pazuzu might now understand why his miasma never affected Lloyd. Grimm realizes that no matter how much mana they use, it won't be enough to affect Lloyd. Lloyd sees this as a chance to test many spells and considers Pazuzu the perfect test subject. Pazuzu is horrified by Lloyd's demonic mana capacity and wonders how this kid has such ridiculous levels of mana. Lloyd attempts to capture Pazuzu in a barrier, but Pazuzu dodges and realizes Lloyd isn't trying to fight him, but to capture him. Fearing for his life, Pazuzu runs while Lloyd makes several more attempts to trap him. Pazuzu thinks he'll die if Lloyd captures him and runs for his life. Lloyd keeps casting barriers without rest, and Grimm asks how many spells he can cast at once. Lloyd replies that he can cast 20 spells at once, including those on standby, but if Grimm helps, he can cast even more. Grimm merges with Lloyd's hand, allowing him to cast barriers even faster. Despite this, Pazuzu manages to dodge and dives underwater. He keeps dodging the barriers, wondering how Lloyd is casting so quickly. Eventually, Lloyd catches him with a spell called Dimensional Enclosure. Pazuzu struggles to escape but can't break free. Pazuzu wonders what Lloyd plans to do, and Lloyd reassures him that magic isn't supposed to work on demons. He reminds Pazuzu of his crimes, like killing the bear wolves' parents and possibly performing chimera experiments on them. Lloyd says Pazuzu should be prepared for the consequences. Using high-speed casting, Lloyd starts hitting Pazuzu with fire, water, wind, and earth spells simultaneously. Lloyd calculates that at his current casting speed, he can cast 240 spells a minute and plans to continue for 30 minutes. After less than 5 minutes, Lloyd notices Pazuzu isn't responding and wonders if he's already dead. Grimm explains that sorcery can affect demons like unpleasant lights and sounds affect humans, and the stress from the amount of magic Lloyd used likely caused Pazuzu's collapse. Pazuzu laments that it took him 100 years to raise those monsters, intending to use them to rule the world, and wonders how he failed so easily. As Albert and the soldiers start to wake up, Lloyd realizes he needs an excuse for everything that happened. He tries to explain to them without implicating himself. Grimm tells Pazuzu that the world doesn't follow those who complain about hardships, but those who enjoy themselves. He adds that Lloyd enjoys what he does, which attracts people to him. Grimm clarifies that his own reason for staying with Lloyd is to find an opportunity for revenge. Pazuzu, surprised that he lost because he wasn't having enough fun, entrusts his ambition to Grimm. Grimm consumes Pazuzu's remains, restoring some of his power. He considers using this power for revenge, but sees Lloyd having fun and decides to postpone his plans. Lloyd then tells Albert and the others that a sorcerer named Robert saved them all, and they choose to believe him. The scene shifts to the king commending Albert for dealing with a demon on top of handling the monster he was originally tasked with, but he questions Albert's judgment in taking only his royal guards. Albert apologizes, and the king asks about the adventurers who helped. Albert explains that Robert disappeared before they regained consciousness. We then see a flashback. After everything was settled, Tao was thrilled that Robert saved her from the demon, but she noticed his poncho looked like Lloyd's. Lloyd pointed out that Robert was over there, and Tao ran after him without hesitation. Back in the present, Albert explains to the king that Tao went after Robert before he could thank her. The king expresses interest in the strength of this sorcerer named Robert. Albert then tells the king that the person who contributed the most to their success was Lloyd, suggesting that Lloyd should be considered for royal succession. He explains that they survived without casualties due to the enchantments Lloyd placed on their weapons, and he believes Lloyd's talents and diligence make him fit for the throne. The king warns that this would create another rival for Albert, but Albert insists that he wants the best person to rule the kingdom for the good of the realm. He argues that Lloyd's youth shouldn't exclude him from succession, but states he doesn't intend to be outdone by him. The king then asks Lloyd if he wants to join the struggle for the throne and stand beside his brothers, but Lloyd humbly declines. Later, we see Lloyd playing with one of the bear wolves, explaining that this one followed them back while the others stayed in the woods. Lloyd pets the bear wolf, calling it Fluffy, which makes Grim jealous. Grim makes himself Fluffy, and Lloyd pets him too. Silpha arrives, noting that the bear wolf seems to like Lloyd. Lloyd hides Grim in the bear wolf's fur and tells Silpha he named the wolf Shiro and wants to teach him many things but doesn't know the best way. Silpha suggests that monster tamers use their mana to control monsters, and Lloyd thinks he should try it. Grim observes that Lloyd turned down the throne because he's more interested in magic. Meanwhile, the king thinks Lloyd is modest, but Albert explains that kingship might be too minor a role for him. The king expresses interest in Lloyd's future. Lloyd issues simple commands to Shiro, which the wolf executes perfectly, but struggles with complex commands. He mentions trying to write command spells into his mana, but they confuse Shiro, making him act silly. Silpha wonders if there's someone knowledgeable about monsters they can consult, and they both think of Princess Elise. They decide to visit her garden tower, unsure if it's a good idea. At the garden tower, Grim asks about Elise. Lloyd explains she is the 6th princess of Salem, 3 years older than him, and an animal lover who keeps various creatures. Elise jumps on Lloyd, smooching him. Her maid, Eris, scolds her for always jumping on Lloyd. Elise explains it's because Lloyd is cute and guesses they are there about the bear wolf. Lloyd is impressed she identified it immediately. Elise attributes it to instincts and maybe mana. Silpha wants to leave, thinking Elise won't be able to explain how she communicates with monsters. Lloyd asks Elise to show them one of her monsters. Elise introduces Leru, the Lesser Fenrir, which surprises Lloyd as it slipped past his detection. Leru steals Silpha's headband, and Lloyd realizes Elise must have given complex commands subtly. He asks her to teach him to communicate with Shiro. Elise says it's not simple, but Lloyd insists. She says the key is love, which helps communicate with any monster. Eris thinks it's pointless to ask Elise since she's a prodigy, but Elise believes anyone can learn it through feeling. She demonstrates by making small animals play pranks on Silpha and Eris. Silpha wants to leave, but Lloyd sees things differently. Lloyd realizes Elise isn't issuing commands, but sharing her will with the animals. When all her creatures moved at once, he noticed mana flowing from her head to theirs, allowing her to subconsciously connect with them. Lloyd uses this technique on Shiro, who successfully follows his complex commands. Seeing this, Eris thinks Lloyd is gifted. She says the technique is similar to what monster tamers use, disappointing Silpha as it's not what she imagined. Elise insists it's about love. Lloyd agrees that love is a crucial factor, enabling empathy to share minds with animals. He mentions that love has depth, and all the girls find this adorable and hug Lloyd. After leaving the garden tower, Lloyd says he has started to understand how to connect with monsters. Silpha is pleased and tells him to apply the same dedication to his training. Lloyd is not enthusiastic about this. Albert arrives and informs Lloyd that he will be accompanying him today. Silpha disapproves, but Lloyd asks Albert why he is here. Albert introduces Lloyd to his older brother Jen, the 4th prince. Lloyd is surprised to see Jen, and the scene shifts to a smithy in the palace. Jen mentions that he heard Lloyd enchanted Albert's spellbound sword and asks him to prove it. Albert explains that Jen is a blacksmith who traveled to Bartram, a neighboring nation renowned for smithing, when he was 10. Lloyd finds this impressive, but Jen insists it's not about him and asks Lloyd to start enchanting. Lloyd enchants the sword quickly, and Jen is astonished to see enchantments for reinforced strength, elasticity, self-cleaning, and self-repair. Jen admits Lloyd is a genius and says they might be able to create the ultimate spellbound sword if they work together. He explains that enchanted weapons are usually not very strong, but enchanting the steel before forging could result in a super weapon. This requires collaboration between an enchanter and a smith. Jen shares that he diverted his focus to creating spellbound swords because he lacked the talent for sorcery. He dreams of making the country a place where everyone can use magic through these swords. Lloyd is interested in the production process and agrees to help. They decide to make a sword that can shoot fire. Lloyd plans to enchant the sword with the fire spell Perlin's Keenies, but Jen points out the spell's formula has 14 parts, while a spellbound sword can only hold 5. Lloyd compresses the formula to 2 parts and tries to apply it to the steel, but it breaks. He then tries splitting the spell into 4 parts, but this also fails. Silpha and Shiro help, but they can't make it work. Grim notices something and tells Lloyd that the mana essence is off. Lloyd purifies the essence and discovers it has little hematite, making it unsuitable for enchanting. He asks Jen if he has any hematite, but Jen doesn't. Lloyd considers sneaking out to hunt monsters in a dungeon again. Silpha suggests going to a dungeon, and Lloyd, worried she might know about his previous excursions, mentions that as a prince, he can't go to a dungeon. Silpha says she talked to the king, who agreed it would be good for Lloyd to broaden his horizons. The scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild. Katerina, the receptionist, gives Lloyd a registration form. Silpha advises him to use his real name. Katerina explains that Lloyd must touch a crystal ball to gauge his strength and assign his adventurer rank. Lloyd suppresses his mana and touches the crystal, resulting in an E rank. The other adventurers laugh, as even the weakest adventurers have a D rank. However, Katerina notes that Lloyd's magic rating is A, comparable to an experienced sorcerer. Lloyd is surprised, having suppressed his mana to 1% of its normal strength. Katerina calls Lloyd the most promising adventurer since the Silverblader, but the other adventurers are skeptical. Silpha tells Katerina they want to accept dungeon quests, but Katerina says they need a B-rank adventurer. Silpha decides to re-register. The other adventurers suggest she ditch the kid and join them, but Katerina reveals that Silpha is the Silverblader, shocking them. Re-registering will demote Silpha to C rank. Tao arrives and offers to help, despite Silpha's reluctance. Tao explains she couldn't find Robert but got promoted to A rank. She asks Lloyd to introduce her to Albert in return for her help. Katerina suggests a quest for them. Lloyd learns that Silpha was an adventurer for training, but couldn't defeat the Assassin Guild. The scene cuts to them clearing a dungeon. Later, Albert asks Jen about their progress. Jen says they can resume work when Lloyd returns in a few days. Albert mentions potential signs of war and asks Jen to continue his research, hoping their swords will save lives. Lloyd arrives, and they successfully craft a spellbound sword that can shoot fire, naming it Delord. Testing it destroys their shooting range, surprising Jen and Albert. Lloyd decides to tone things down next time. As Lloyd prepares for bed, he reflects on the hard work involved in making and mass-producing the sword. He senses a strange presence in the courtyard, feeling like there is a hole in space, and notes that even the perceptive Shiro cannot sense it. Watch this next video.